Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that, at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. Kristen Tool and I have something very important in common. We want to connect all people to real, healthy, nutritious food. And sometimes that food is harvested right from the farm, and other times it is made into nutritious soups. Caring for and stewarding land has been a lifelong dream of Kristen's. She and her husband Chris have been working to restore Olsen Farm, her husband's family farm in Lanesborough, Massachusetts, where they raise chickens, keep honeybees, and grow fruits, veggies, and herbs. Kristen used to work as an early education studio art teacher, website designer, and writer for Mother Earth news blog. She has her BFA in textile design, and you will also find her creating art using natural, found, and recycled materials. However, during COVID, an expanded farm mission unfolded for Kristen. When COVID-19 struck in spring 2020, people were having trouble locating fresh food and experiencing heightened health risks. Kristen ran a pilot project through her own farm to provide local food to seniors. Out of that pilot, Heart and Soil Collective was born, with a mission to connect people to the land where their food grows, making healthy food and hands-on natural experiences accessible to all. This collective now collaborates with several other farms in the area to supply and deliver healthy food and prepare and deliver soups for seniors. Kristen has worked diligently to develop a unique business model to support her farmers and her community. As a nonprofit, Kristen faces the demands of always needing to create innovative ways to generate funds to retain and expand her much-needed programs. Learn more about Kristen's inspirational mission and about how you can directly help her to continue her mission. This is Jen Ross, your Agritourist podcast host. Enjoy my conversation with Kristen Tool. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So, Kristen, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm really excited to hear about everything that you are doing. So why don't we start, you and is it your husband?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your background, how you guys came together and his background. And I know that, I don't know if you own or he owns or whose family it was, Olsen Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then then we'll get into Heart and Soil and how this came about and what you're doing, which again is pretty amazing. So why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk. Yeah, I mean, I can. So Chris and I, we actually went to high school together, but at that time we weren't really, friends necessarily. He was friends with my brother, and so I went away to college, went to San Francisco. Was there for 8 years. When I moved back home.
Did you both live in Berkshire County?
Yep.
Okay,
we grew
so you're
up
both
here.
from, okay.
Chris grew up here in this house where we live. So his dad built this house in the early 80s, and he grew up here on the family land. I grew up right over the border in Vermont and then moved to Lanesborough when I was in middle school. So we knew each other for a long time, but weren't an item until I came back from college, and I actually ran into him like in the hospital. I was there to get clearance for work for a teaching job that I just had, and he was there doing something else, and we just ran into each other and got back connected and ended up I think it was like a month later that we started dating. So
Oh, wow.
sometimes things fall into place. One of our very first dates, we went on a hike at Wacona Falls in Dalton, which is a local hiking trail. And there's a lot of old stone walls and ruins and things along the path. And he found a sterling silver ring in the cracks in the stone wall, and gave that to me. And then I almost immediately lost it, but I just love the like magic of, finding a treasure in
That's
a wall.
terrific.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
So
terrific. You still have that ring?
I lost it, of course. I'm not
Oh,
super great at, yeah. Yeah.
no.
So, but I still have the memory of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So like magical how things happen like that sometimes.
So
Yeah.
you were teaching at the time.
Yeah, I was teaching, and Chris was a certified arborist. So we both, had our full-time jobs that we were doing. We got an apartment together in Pittsfield, and then he really decided he wanted to move back to the family land. This was in 2015. His dad lived here still and had some medical stuff that had been going on. And so we moved back here with him to help take care of the house, to kind of start this homestead. Chris left his job working with Race Mountain Tree Care as an arborist at that time. And I stayed working at Williams College, working in their children's center.
Quick question. Was the land a farm?
Yes.
Originally,
so
okay.
The original farm, Chris's great-grandparents, Randy and Tom Olsen, came from Norway to New York City in the 20s. Great grandpa hated city life, and so he took the train to Pittsfield and then walked to Lanesborough, found this piece of land and just bought it without telling his wife. And then, took the train back to the city and was like, "Oh, we're moving to the country." And so
stories like that just like
it's wild.
they're wild because you think about life today. And for so many reasons that can happen. It's not even about the concept of just the doing it and surprising someone, but just you can't do that these days.
Yes, you can't. I mean, there's so many steps. I think we have all the original deeds, which is really cool to see, the farmers who owned it before. And I think they bought, it was 90 acres at the time, and they bought it for $1,200. So, to see that transition to what land is valued at now, it's pretty wild to look back at it. So it was an active farm at that time with the 90 acres. They had, cows, pigs, and chickens, and grew vegetables. There are photos that we have of Great Grandpa Olsen. He had a draft horse named Joey and a cart, and he would load the cart up with eggs and walk into Pittsfield, sell all the eggs, and walk back, once a week. That was like his big money. That, right now you could probably make a lot of money carting eggs around too.
Yes.
So some things in history really absolutely do repeat themselves. And we still have the original farmhouse that was built in the 1790s is still standing on the property. It hasn't been inhabited since the 70s, other than by bats and woodchucks and other creatures. But that was the original house that they bought when they moved here in the late 20s. And then it wasn't actively farmed then, from the 70s on, when Great Grandpa Olsen died. It was more of a homestead. And then in the early 80s, Chris's parents bought a little parcel, a subdivided parcel, and built the house that we live in, that I'm, sitting in right now, where Chris grew up. And so it's we were able to kind of reclaim pieces that were here before, and then add new things, adapt things to this time period and this climate. It's been really amazing for us to be able to find plants. Chris's mom was just an amazing gardener, and she built all these beautiful gardens with stone paths, pollinator gardens, before it was like a thing in the early 80s, right? And she passed away before we were together, and the gardens just kind of got overgrown because it's a full-time upkeep job. So we found her original journals where she had drawn diagrams of where she planted things and made
Oh,
notes
I
of
just
where
got the
she purchased
chills.
the plants. Yeah, isn't that,
That's
it's amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, to have that, piece of history and uncover these plants that were still kind of in the weeds, and we were able to bring them back out. One of the last things that she did before she got really sick was she sprinkled forget-me-not seeds around. And so in the spring, that's one of the first things that pops up are these little kind of
Oh,
paths of forget-me-nots around. So the history for us connected to this land is very important. And that was the big piece of, yes, we lived here. We wanted to keep living in our home when Chris's dad died, but then thinking about the legacy of this land, how we have 30 acres still of the original 90, and the importance of keeping that land as forest and not allowing it to be sold and developed. So that was, one of the big pushes why we decided to, after Chris's dad died, instead of walking away, it would have been easy to go, get an apartment somewhere else. But we instead decided to fight and ended up succeeding after multiple years of, going through court. And we were able to purchase the land parcel first. And then during COVID, we were able to finally purchase the house as well to keep everything all together.
Why was that such a struggle? What happened with that?
There was family contention. And I think that, we kind of learned that that's quite common in estates when people have differing opinions about things. And it's heartbreaking because our family was dealing with the grief of losing my father-in-law. All of us were dealing with that. And then on top of that, to then lose trust and communication with each other. And to this day, there's not communication with most of the family. And that it's really heartbreaking. It is. And it's heartbreaking and heartbreaking to know that it's common. But it's really sad.
So so you have the property and you have everything now. And so what have you been doing with that property?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we first moved back in with Chris's dad, we got the chickens right away. He was a carpenter, so he and Chris built this little chicken coop that it's kind of a mini version of the house. The house is a salt box style house,
So
and so
cool.
the chicken coop mirrors it. And we were able to disassemble my mom's garage. She lives right around the corner, and use that lumber to build this chicken coop.
Great.
And we got honeybees as well at that time, more thinking like this is a hobby. It's a, little homestead type of thing. And we rebuilt a small vegetable garden. So since then we've expanded. I think we had 5 chickens to begin with. And we at one point had close to 70. And we had 4 chicken coops. We had to purchase 3 other little chicken coops. At one point, we had 18 beehives. We have added 2 48-foot hoop houses for indoor growing, and the gardens have expanded. I'd say it's probably about a half acre of vegetable gardens at this point, as well as kind of reclaiming the old orchards. There were a lot of old apple trees that were here from the original farm, lots of blueberries.
Wow.
So we've reclaimed some of those areas and then planted in more, pears, peach trees, pawpaws or something that we're starting to cultivate, thinking about planting crops that may do well as the climate changes, things that do well now in, kind of Pennsylvania, New Jersey area where it's trending for us to be a little warmer here. So yeah, thinking creatively about all of those pieces.
So are you both outside of heart and soil? So we'll get to that. Are you both is this your full-time focus right now, the farm, or are you still teaching?
Yes. So when we decided to take the leap of having the Olsen Farm as an LLC business, that was both of our full-time jobs. I left my teaching job at that point. Chris had already left his arborist job.
So let me ask you, how did that feel? How was that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was terrifying at the moment because we were still involved in the legal battle to
Oh,
try and purchase the land. And so the idea of, taking that leap of faith and walking away from a regular paycheck in order to fully invest in running this farm business full time was terrifying. But it got to the point I was driving to work at the daycare center I worked at, and I had a panic attack. It was just too much. All the legal battles that we were going through with the family and the stress and, trying to get to work and be there for these kids who needed me, and I fully loved working with the kids in that scope. It was a nature-based education program, so, aligned with my
yeah.
drive to connect kids with nature. And it was just too much. I like crawled into work and they had to call an ambulance because I couldn't breathe. I had to go to the ER. So that to
Wow.
me was the message that it was like, okay, you've got to, pick one of these more than full-time jobs. You physically cannot do both of them. And so, taking that leap and going full-time into farming. So that was in 2018, like May of 2018 is when we both became full-time at the farm. And Chris was doing a little bit of tree pruning, landscaping work, through the farm, but on his own schedule rather than working for another company.
Hey, it's Jen. I need to interrupt this podcast episode to talk about two really important topics: farms and food. This will be quick. Here's the situation. Small farms face increasing expenses. Funding for farms and nonprofits has an uncertain future. Labor shortages and climate change are a constant factor. At the same time, over 10% of our country's population are single seniors living alone. It's impossible for many of these community members to shop at farmers markets and purchase fresh local foods. These community members lose out, and so do the farmers. So when I hear about business models that help both the farmer and the community member alike, I want to spread the word, and I really hope that these models are looked at and replicated. Heart and Soil Collective is a Berkshire-based nonprofit that purchases produce directly from small farms and delivers this produce to local homes at no cost. They are feeding the farmer and they are feeding the community member. On March 15th, Heart and Soil Collective launched a crowdfunding campaign called Locally Grown to Local Homes. This important campaign funds their community produce and soup programs. The goal? To raise $60,000 to pay local farmers for their produce and to deliver to local homes, and also to make soups delivered in the winter. Heart and Soil needs your help. Click on the link in our bio, go to the heartbeatfarms.com website, or check out the podcast notes to contribute to their crowdfunding campaign. And if you can't contribute, then just find a local farm and become a regular customer. We need to stay focused on supporting our local farms and strengthening our regional food systems. Thank you for the listen and enjoy the rest of the podcast episode. Okay, wow. So 2018, full-time farmers.
Yep.
So what was that like at first? What was the experience? How did you create revenue streams through the farm at that time? Like, because obviously, there's been a life cycle of things. So
Yeah. Yeah. A lot crammed into just a few years. I think our biggest revenue source came from honey, and bee products. That was, I think it was 2019 is when we had 18 hives and they ended up all dying over the winter, which is the first time we'd had all of the hives die. And it's an interesting situation with honey as a product because honeybees are considered livestock, but the product is the honey. And so when all of the bees died, the honey was still there. So the crop of honey was still there. So we couldn't claim any crop loss because we had these, I think it was something like 800 pounds of honey in the hives that we had to then extract. And then we had to to buy more bees, as livestock. So we ended up being in a weird situation where we were like, well, it's a crop loss, or it's a future crop loss, because then we won't have the honey crop the next year. And that was, that was going into COVID. So in 2020, typically we would extract honey 2 times a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And so we had these 800 pounds of honey that were in our hives from the winter when all the bees died. We had to extract it before it got crystallized. And that means that, it's hardened and you can't get it out of the honeycomb. And there were no mason jars anywhere because everybody had bought up all, like there were jar shortages.
Yep.
And so we set up a bring your own container bulk honey sale system in our yard where, we said everybody wears a mask. You come to the table, we weigh your jar, you go inside, fill it up with your honey, you come back out and pay. And so we were able to sell all of that, 800 pounds of honey to neighbors. One of our neighbors brought like a stock pot and bought, bought that much honey to take home. So it was a success, a solution to an unexpected problem.
That's great though. That's a great solution. And it saved you a lot of money on jars.
Exactly. And the stress of, I was like, what can we, we don't want to compromise and buy plastic jars, glass jars are the standard.
I remember our beekeeper had that issue with the jars, and then he had to change the size of the jars, which made his labels completely not fit. It was like this whole problem that kept replicating itself. And I was like, oh man, I'm just like,
I think it shined a light. COVID shined a light on a lot of things that we take for granted, how easy it is. Like, I can go get mason jars anytime, and then it's like, oh wait, I can't. And what else can I have to adapt to this while adapting to all of these other changes and dangers. And it was very eye-opening in a lot of ways. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm always hopeful that we keep that in mind these days, but I feel like it disappears from our minds very easily.
Yes.
And, as a business, especially, I think we should always be thinking that, what are, is this COVID proof, or what is the contingency for something like that happening, a shortage of something? I mean, because we saw even when there were problems with the ships and strikes, there's
delays.
So many things that can cause problems with this now with the egg stuff.
Yep.
But
we're always adapting.
So I love that honey solution. That was great and very sustainable.
Yes. Right.
So honey, what else were you doing at that time?
We had a small vegetable CSA just with a handful of family and friends. And then Chris was doing landscaping as well. Tree pruning, fruit tree pruning is kind of his specialty.
Oh, wow.
And I also was doing markets with farm related art, cards of my illustrations and jewelry and made with mushrooms, things like that were related to the farm. And that was bringing in a pretty good amount of revenue for us. And then, like I mentioned, COVID happened in 2020. Put that all on hold. We had planned that spring. We bought extra seeds. We had started extra seedlings because we were like, all right, we're really going to expand our CSA. We're going to do all the farmers markets. And then they were all canceled because of COVID. So, and that's kind of what led into us creating Heart and Soil Collective. So it was that, the spring, March of 2020, we had all these grand plans to attend every Berkshire County Farmers Market and double our CSA membership to bring in more revenue at the farm. When all the markets were closed, we had all this produce that we had grown and faced with, we don't have any revenue because that's what we were relying on for revenue. And for most farmers, it's like you save up all through the year so that you can get through the winter when it's really slow. And then in March, you start bringing in revenue again as markets begin to open, as you start selling CSAs. And so we were faced with, how are we going to make money? We had no revenue from March until the end of May when even unemployment wasn't available for self-employed people until the end of May. And so neighbors, community members just started donating money to the farm so that we could deliver the produce that we were growing right to people's homes, right to seniors in our small town. And so again, it was one of those kind of like, holy crap, there's this problem. And, how do we solve it creatively with the resources we have? And the program was so well received. We had community members that summer would come and help us set up a no contact distribution table where we would provide produce from our farm, and then people would bring extra produce they had grown in their home gardens. It was a safe way to get some social interaction during COVID. And at that point, I had so many people volunteering to deliver the produce. We had to have shifts because we only had 8 houses we were delivering to, and I had like 30 people who wanted to be involved. And so, it was like, you take this bag this week, and you two can sit at the table, and you can take it next week. And just a really a hopeful community connections in a time that was really hard for everyone. And being able to meet the seniors, all the seniors we were delivering to, they're single seniors, they live on their own, some had mobility challenges. So it was not safe for them to be going out and trying to get to the grocery store. And for us, for Chris and I, it was particularly special because these seniors were people who grew up here in Lanesborough with Chris's grandparents. They knew about the old farm. They shared stories about, coming here when they were kids and riding on the horse-drawn carriage. And one of the women shared that she had actually lived here at the farm with her mother for a summer when she was a child. Another senior shared some old maps that they had of our farm and the neighboring farm. So just, being able to realize that there are all these connections and support systems. We learned that one of the women, that her mother is sisters with Chris's maternal grandmother. And so she turned 100 this year, this woman. And she calls us her half-assed cousins because we're, connected in some way by blood.
I love it.
That's very fun. It's fun to be able to know that, this community that supported us while we were working to buy the farm. We used money from my job teaching, and then we also did crowdfunding at that time when we were working to save the farm. And I think we brought in about $40,000.
Wow!
From the crowdfunding over a 2-year time period. That's to help us. Yeah, pay to purchase the land. So
very nice.
And then we're able to give back to the community through the nonprofit. So it's full circle.
Yeah. So when did you form the nonprofit officially?
We officially incorporated in the summer of 2021.
Okay.
So during 2020, while we were, kind of working through our farm, I was also participating in a business accelerator program through E4All, Berkshire County. That's Entrepreneurship for All.
I read
amazing
that.
program. Yeah. And so they, I think I was like the second round of the Berkshire County. It's a nationwide organization, but they had just started coming to Berkshire County, and we were like the COVID cohort because we were all online. Like we couldn't have any in-person meetings.
Yep.
And just being able to be connected with a group of people who were all, doing small business stuff around in the Berkshires, to learn about what each of us were doing and kind of have this little family, where we could meet online a couple times a week and work on our businesses. So that's where I went into that program with the question of, does it make sense to start a nonprofit alongside our for-profit business? And I was connected with the Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires for great resources, with mentors. And in the end, we decided it makes sense to start the nonprofit. And I had written bylaws during E4All as part of the program. And then we got our, tax ID number in 2020 and officially got tax exemption in, I believe it was July of 2021 is when we officially, became fully 501c3. The
name, who came up with that name?
That's a great question. Yeah. So through E4All, the whole time, coming up with a name was like, I just felt like it was this roadblock. And I had all these little notes written down. And at one point we thought, we could call it Susan Seed. Susan was my late mother-in-law. And then my husband was like, oh, I don't really want to have like a family member's name attached to it, and it actually, I was like worrying because it was getting close to the final presentation for E4All. And I'm like, I need a name. I need to have a name. Like I can't present this business without a name. And I had a dream about, it was the image of our logo it's like a heart with roots and there's a little sprout kind of growing
beautiful,
up
actually.
inside.
I love that logo.
Thank you. Thanks. That was a dream.
It's so simple, but it's dream image. So meaningful.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And that, the history for us, it's like, we have our roots in the ground here on this property. And then the community rose around us, surrounding us with their love and support. And it's allowed us to grow this business. And so heart seeds was one idea. And then heart and soil. I thought, the play on words, heart and soil. And then the collective word actually was attached to us when my fellow E4All program participant called the Laugh Dealers, they're comedians. They did little introductions for each of us for our final presentations. And they introduced me as the Heart and Soil Collective. And I was like, I love that. That's amazing. Because it's this collective of, we work with farmers, we work with councils on aging, with volunteers. So it's this collective of all of these individuals and groups just working together to help make sure everyone is fed and connected to the land.
Excellent.
Happened organically. Yeah, thanks.
I absolutely love it. Okay, so we're incorporated. We have our IRS designation. We have a name.
Yeah, important. Yes.
And a logo, which again, I love. And so what, coming out of that course, what were your next steps? And give me, I presume, did you write a mission statement during that course? So Tell me, I guess, as of today, talk to me about the mission of this organization, and then give me, bring me along a little bit of how it's evolved and where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So part of the E4All program was to kind of build that mission statement and figure out, who is your target customer? How is your business kind of solving a problem for them? How are you going to reach them? And then, budgeting pieces. So it gave us a little bit of information on all the important pieces of starting a business. And I think I was the first nonprofit business structure to go through the program. And so that's why they connected me with Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires. And so the mission statement, which is the same now, is to connect people to the land where their food is grown, making a fresh, healthy food and hands-on agricultural experiences accessible to all. So a balance of our food programming, where we purchase produce directly from farms and deliver it directly to homes. And then also education programs where we help to build school gardens. We last summer started holding farm tours where the community is invited to come see behind the scenes of some of the farms we work with, and then do a hands-on activity like making recycled paper with seeds in it, just trying to get people to see what's already being grown here and then create more space to have more food produced here where we're living. It's like the long-term solution for food access.
Right.
Instead of the focus is on immediate, emergency food sites, which are necessary. And especially we saw during COVID when kids were out of school, they didn't have access to food. And so, food security has kind of been focused on those emergency food sites. Like, how can we get boxes and cans of food here to give to people And our approach is more of a long-term approach of how can we make sure that more food is being grown here where we
Yep.
are, and more people have access to the understanding and the tools and the space to be able to kind of take that on and have that autonomy to say, oh, I can grow a tomato on my patio,
Exactly.
just helping more people feel connected to the land.
And I love that part of your mission because that's something we were doing. And I just think it's so critical. And
Yeah.
hence everything going on in the world. And I know there's a lot of concerns about, I always tell people, a lot of people are very concerned right now for obvious reasons, but I'm like, what's happening now can happen at any time for any, like we can't just say this is just a certain period of time issue.
Right.
We always have to be looking long term and bringing tools to people so they can help themselves and not feel desperate.
Yes.
And be able so that they can be proactive and take matters into their own hands. And growing food, there's so many ways to grow food. And, there's people come up with excuses like I live in an apartment, but there's so many ways to grow food, or find a community garden, or, find someone with some land, or do it in your own house, or those towers. Or there's so many ways. So I love the fact that you're focused more long-term in addition to feeding, because there's not enough of that going on. There's just not enough of that going on.
And it feels like there is a shift to that mindset, especially across the Berkshires. I talked with another farmer this morning who we're looking to add her as a partner farm this year as we expand into another community, and just talking about that, long-term mindset, and that a lot of farmers are facing challenges where they're leasing land that then gets sold out from under them. And then they're like a farmer without a home. And this disconnect between, preserving farmland and developing it. Yeah. So I think there is a shift, and there are a lot of local organizations here that are paying attention to that. I know Berkshire Natural Resources Council, we talked with them last year about a potential future food forest project, and they had said their mission is somewhat shifting to focus on preserving farmland as well as, public forest spaces, because seeing that, it really is true. If there are no farms, there's no food. And it's like the time to start doing this work was 10 years ago. And so now we've really got to make sure that we are able to keep as much land viable for farming as possible.
So important, so needed. So tell me about some of the activities. So I know you're doing soups. You have a winter soup program. Soups are near and dear to my heart. We used to, in our CSA, we used to have a soup. And that was our way to differentiate, because it's more of a middle class area that we're in. A lot of the farms on Long Island are more out east, and they're serving a higher end community.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, well, what can we do for our community that is very needed, and an instant meal with the vegetables? So we had a chef. He would take a vegetable, and it was a very plant-based soup. I just wanted it to be very simple. I wanted to stay away from allergies and all the other issues. And the CSA participants appreciated it. And then what we did, my daughters and two other kids who were volunteers at the farm for many years saw a need in the community for quick, healthy meals. And so they partnered with Head Start, and they raised money, and then we produced more soups, and they would go to the school, and they would get bread donations from a local bakery, and they would literally go to the school and hand out the soups to families. It was such an amazing experience, especially for young kids, to meet the recipients and talk to them and understand the challenges, not just hear about it through adults. But soups are great. and it was just this connection that was created. And they saw literally from, they were seeding and, raising these plants and harvesting, cleaning, bringing it to the chef, and literally bringing the soups to the people. So again, that connection, making that connection for, especially for young people to understand the issues, to me, it's going to be of service to the world in some way in the future. So yeah, tell me about your soups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very similar heart in it. And it happened organically. I know I keep saying everything happens organically, but it seems
That's
like
okay.
it just does. And we just kind of go with it. One of the farms that we partner with had their whole field of butternut squash. The deer came in and just, took a little nibble out of every one of them. And so they weren't viable to be sold at the market, but they were perfectly great for making a big batch of soup. And so we thought, all right, well, we'll buy this aftermarket produce, we'll make this big batch of soup. I think that year we'd received a big bundle of apples that were, perfect for soup. So we made a butternut apple bisque, and it was so delicious. We were able to use the certified kitchen there at the farm, because for cooking,
great.
Have to have certified kitchen, have to have certified people. And so, there's lots of pieces.
There's a lot of rules.
There are a lot of rules, exactly. And we were fortunate to be able to use that space at the farm. And the soup was so well received, and especially for our seniors who, some of them are not physically able to cut up a squash to make a soup for themselves. It's easy, it's nutrition, it's healthy, and it's also in the winter months. It's a little bit of social interaction. And so at that time, we were still just delivering in Lanesborough, and the Lanesborough ambulance crew had volunteered to help us make the delivery. So they were able to bring, this delightful soup to seniors in the wintertime.
That's terrific.
Wellness checks and just build relationships. Think about the work that EMTs do, where it's literally life and death at every moment, and the stress, all of that, for them to be able to get a little break and meet the seniors in non-emergency situations. It's allowed trust to be built. And we've had a couple of seniors who they really wouldn't have called to ask for help before these relationships were built. And now, like this year, myself and the EMS director, we were invited to a 100-year-old's birthday party because of those relationships that were built, over sharing soup. And so, helping to decrease food waste is important as well. Helping to pay the farmers, they've already done all the work to grow all that squash, and having to throw it in the compost is it's heartbreaking, It
is. We had that once with cucumbers one year. Yeah. They literally took a bite out of every cucumber, and we were like,
so frustrating.
Oh, and then the main farmer, her father did fences. She didn't put up a 6-foot fence. I'm not kidding you. She put up a 15-foot fence.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, I'm keeping these guys out.
Yeah.
It was a fortress.
They'll just jump right over it. And that's what, at our farm, we have like a 2-foot fence, and that's just to try to keep the bunnies out. We don't even try to keep the deer out, because it's like a fortress. They can jump over anything. So yeah, the infrastructure to be able to really lock down your fields, it's millions of dollars of fencing is required. Yeah, it's wild.
She was lucky. Her dad was in the business, so it was a major discount.
That's a very good connection to have, for sure. And so with the soup, I'm personally am not a person who cooks. Like, I would not say that I know how to cook. And so soup has been a really nice way for me to kind of jump into that, because you can't really mess up soup, right? You put it all in the pot, and, you can add broth if it's too thick, or you can, put some more carrots. It's very forgiving. And so it's been really fun, for me to learn. And we've had, from the beginning, we've had some of the seniors would come and help us cook. They shared recipes with us.
See, that's great too. So you're involving them, not just on the fact that you're giving these soups and creating community. Some of them are getting involved in the process.
Yes, exactly.
That's terrific.
And they love, it's like having a whole handful of grandmas in the kitchen. It's just, the social piece of it has been really great. And at this point, the soup program is so big that we've hired a group of Haitian women who are all chefs, and they're ServSafe certified. So we've hired them to cook these big batches of soup. I think we're cooking, it ends up being like 40 gallons of soup at a time or something. So we've reached our capacity. And so we're now thinking for next year, we're going to have to outsource it in another different way. And so outsourcing the cooking of the soup to another organization, and then we can host kind of community cooking days where we come together in the certified kitchen. We've been able to pay through grant funding to get a handful of our volunteers Serve Safe certified, inviting in local chefs. 2 of my board members are chefs to just cook, what we have from the farms together to kind of bridge that education gap of, so we're giving people this bag of produce, and if they don't know how to eat it, it's not actually feeding them. It's creating stress. It's creating food waste. And so if we can come together and say, this week we have kale and garlic scapes, and this is a couple ways to cook them, and then cook together and eat together, creates community, decreases food waste, and, puts money in the pockets of farmers. And it's really fun. So I just wrote a grant to kind of solidify our community cooking days for this year as a new thing that we want to start doing.
That's what I was going to ask you next is where are you, where are your sources of income coming from? Are you concerned at all given, the sources of grants these days? And, where else are you sourcing funds from to execute your programs?
Yes. So I will say yes to all of that. Yes, we have received the majority of our funding has been through grants from day one. And then in 2023, we were connected with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
Yes.
And they had us become a sub-awardee of a USDA grant, a large 3-year USDA grant that they had been working with another group with. And so that fully funded us in 2024 and then half of 2023. It allowed us to expand our soup and produce programs from delivery to 25 homes to delivering to 115 homes. I believe we were working with just 2 farms in 2022, and now we have 12 partner farms. So we've been able to, I think when I did the math, it's like a 260% increase in the programming we've been able to provide. So, we were funded 80-90% by grants. And then that large grant, the USDA grant, was completed December of 2024. My gut instinct last year told me, don't waste the time applying for federal grants with this new presidency coming in, that it's not worth the time. So I focused on applying to smaller, more local grants. So far, we've received 5 of the 13 grants for programming through local organizations, Mass Cultural Council, Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. And we are working on creating a crowdfunding campaign that's going to launch in March. It's called our Locally Grown to Local Homes campaign. And that will be where we're going to pull in the bulk of the money for our produce and soup programs. So first time we've tried something like that. So I'm not sure, what to expect, but we are working with an amazing consultant who we were able to pay through the USDA grant to help us put together this campaign. So that's
terrific. It really is. And honestly, when I was talking to Rebecca from Berkshire Ag Ventures, I said that I'm like, we need to start thinking about not depending on some of the traditional grants anymore going forward, regardless of who's president, and what party, because that money can shift at any time. And as nonprofits and as businesses, we just need to figure out other ways and also figure out ways to work together to help each other towards common goals, which you are doing with your farm partners. I just want to talk about that a little bit because I think that, so how does it work with your, what do you consider a farm partner? Let's start there. Like what are they doing for you and what are you doing for them? Because I
Yeah,
think
great.
you've created some unique relationships and synergistic relationships.
Yeah. So the partner farms, I believe Holiday Brook Farm in Dalton was our first partner farm, and we had been awarded a grant to expand programming, and we couldn't produce any more produce from our own farm. And because we have our for-profit farm business and the nonprofit, to avoid, conflict of interest once we officially became a nonprofit, we don't use any produce from our farm anymore since
Okay.
2021. So Holiday Brook Farm is one of the larger farms in the area, and I worked one summer at the farmers market, so I knew, all the farmers. They were
Right.
the first farm that I reached out to. And so what we do with the partner farms is we say, what's your capacity? How much produce can you provide each week? For the seniors, they're small shares, because most of the houses we're delivering to are single seniors. So instead of giving them, 20 pounds of produce that's just going to go to waste, we keep it small with, 3 or 4 items that they can eat within a week that will remain fresh. And then once we know what the farm's capacity is, we pay them in a lump sum in the beginning of the season, because from our perspective as farmers, getting a little bit of money each week it's better to have that lump sum up front. And then each week we say, okay, we got 20 pounds of carrots, 20 pounds of kale. We deduct each week on our end, and the farms do on their end. So we both keep records of what's being distributed.
Right.
And then if there's a need to re-up that lump sum in the middle of the season, that's been our system that we do. So we try to make the program as little work on the farms as possible, because again, having done all of the work, you're harvesting everything, you're washing it, you're packing it up, you're bringing it to the farmers markets, you're figuring out what to do with it afterwards. So we just ask the farmers to harvest. They harvest the produce, have it set aside for us. We go to the farms, we pack the bags for delivery. We have branded cooler bags with delivery tags on them, so we know which house they're going to. The tags include the number of people in the household, any, food intolerances, special tips, like if someone wants us to put it on their back porch if they're not home, things like that. And then our volunteers, and in the summer, our summer interns, they do the work of packing those bags and delivering them directly to the homes. So trying to make it as little work as possible on the farms, because farmers are doing too much, already. So
Yep.
trying to make it the most beneficial and right.
So just to sum up, I guess, what do you need? Like what are you in need of to grow your mission?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think through the year and a half that we had the USDA grant, I was also connected with a lot of consultations. And so that allowed us to build a marketing outreach strategy, the beginnings of a strategic plan, build our, newsletter subscriber list. So we're doing those little pieces, but now we're in this position where there's no federal money. There's no federal money that's going to be coming. And for the farms that we work with, they're relying on federal funding to pay them for, the HIP program and SNAP programs that may also disappear. Our organization is not big enough to support that need. We're working this year to just sustain the number of households we were delivering to last year rather than growing, because our revenue is non-existent at the moment until we do this fund drive. So what we need is more people to join the collective, more people who want to come volunteer with us, come cook soup, help us to spread the word about what we're doing. And once people learn about the mission, that's when they become donors. So, bringing more people into the collective and being part of helping to kind of nourish the Berkshires through the food programming and through the education pieces. We are doing monthly volunteer work days in 2025. They're on the last Saturday of the month, and we're holding them kind of different places at some of the farms we work with and some, community areas to just, again, build that collective, tell more people about what we're doing, providing volunteer opportunities. I think right now is a really important time. People are looking for meaningful things to be involved in their communities, to feel, safe and connected to other people who, with like minds. So in a way, it's the perfect opportunity for organizations like us to be able to say, this is what we're doing and this is how you can be part of it, whether it means coming and cooking soup or, helping us plant a community garden or reaching out to a potential donor who might want to support our work. Right. There are lots of ways people can be involved. Our part of our campaign slogan for the locally grown to local homes is, join the collective, of the farms and volunteers and organizations that we're partnering with. It's endless. There's space for everyone. We just had a couple of weeks ago, we had the Pittsfield mayor, Peter Marchetti, and local representative Tricia Farley-Bouvier and state senator Paul Mark were able to join us to cook a batch of soup with the Haitian ladies who we've hired. It was a very special recipe. It's called soup jumu, and it's the Haitian freedom soup. And so this recipe, when Haiti was colonized by the French, the Haitian and African slaves were required to cook this certain type of squash, make this special soup for the white colonizers, and they weren't allowed to eat it themselves. So it was like, food as oppression. And when Haiti successfully kicked out the French in the early 1800s, their first country to ever successfully overthrow their colonizers. And then they celebrated by cooking the soup and eating it themselves. And so they cook it every year on New Year's Day to celebrate, Haitian freedom. And so being able to be in this space and learn about the culture and the history of food, there are food cultures from all over the world, and we can, adapt things for what's growing regionally and bring people in and learn that history and also enjoy the food together. So it was a very special soup cooking time. And it was easy to do. It was easy to invite everybody to come, cook and celebrate that food.
That's very meaningful. And yes, food is a great equalizer. Yeah. And it brings people together on so many levels. So that's great. It's great what you're doing. And I'll put a lot of links, all the links and everything in there. And then awesome. When is this campaign launching?
So the Locally Grown to Local Homes is going to launch online on March 15th, and it'll run March 15th to April 15th. And then we're working on putting together a launch party on the 14th. Nice. And that's going to be, for people who have donated before, who can help us kind of kick off the campaign and help spread the word. So we'll be doing some, little video interviews and things like that between now and the launch day to get people really excited about the campaign and tell them what we're doing. I have a little bit of information on our website, but our website is also kind of being rebuilt right now. So there's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on.
I know, it never ends. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing, and keep at it because it's so needed. I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. So I was recently listening to one of the Grounded in Maine podcasts produced by Amy Fagan. The podcast is an open conversation about being mindful about how we show up in the world. It's focused on sustainability, and how sustainability impacts every part of our life. What are some of the most important takeaways that people will get from your podcast?
One of the things that I hope that people will take away from the podcast is encouragement. Like, I want them to not feel like you have to spend thousands of dollars to be part of the solution, because, there are a lot of sustainable, things that say sustainability or sustainable, like solar panels or organic cotton and stuff like that. Like, some things are just more expensive because they have that tagline, that phrase or whatever. But there are so many ways that you can be sustainable. You just have to be a little bit creative. And so I'm putting out all these ideas that what people are doing, just to put the thought out there that we can all be part of it without going broke.
So how can people find your podcast?
My podcast is wherever podcasts are found. It is just called Grounded in Maine. I also have my Instagram is where I am most active, and the Instagram handle is Grounded in Maine Podcasts.